I had always taken pride in the land I lived on. When I first bought the property, it wasn't much, just a patch of ground on the edge of the subdivision, a little lower than the rest. Every spring, runoff from the higher homes turned my yard into a swamp, eating away at the soil and threatening my foundation. Most people would have complained to the HOA, begged them to fix the drainage, but I knew better. They didn't care about solving problems unless they could find a way to profit from them. So I rolled up my sleeves, hired some help, and built a small dam. It wasn't some giant concrete wall like you see in documentaries, but a sturdy, well-engineered structure that controlled the flow of water. It slowed down the runoff, let excess drain into a controlled channel, and collected the rest in a pond that shimmered under the afternoon sun. What started as a necessity turned into something beautiful. Ducks came to swim there. Kids in the neighborhood fished for minnows, and even my neighbors who pretended not to like me admitted it gave the place a kind of charm. The dam wasn't just for me, it protected the entire lower part of the neighborhood. Without it, any heavy storm would send torrents of water down the hill, flooding driveways and filling basements. More than once, a neighbor stopped me to say, "Glad you put that thing in." Saved me a lot of trouble. I'd smile, but inside I felt a quiet pride. I wasn't just maintaining my property. I was making life better for everyone nearby. Of course, the HOA didn't see it that way. From the moment they caught wind of the project, they tried to claim I needed approval to build it. I had checked the local county permits and followed every regulation to the letter. What they wanted was a cut of the money. They called it additional community improvement dues, but I knew it was extortion. When I refused to pay, the letters started. Then came the threats. They warned me I was out of compliance and hinted that further action would be taken if I didn't settle my account. I wasn't about to bow down. The dam was legal, the water was under control, and my fees were already paid in full. But with every passing week, I could feel the tension building. I had built the dam to stop a flood, but little did I know the real flood was about to come from the HOA itself. It started with an early morning knock at my door. Standing there were two men in reflective vests with clipboards, flanked by the HOA president herself, Mrs. Chambers. She wore that smug expression she always carried, the kind that made you feel like she had already won before you even spoke. One of the men announced they were inspecting the property. I told them they had no right, but Chambers cut me off with her syrupy, condescending tone. "You've ignored repeated notices, and the board has voted. This structure is a violation and must come down," I argued, pointing out the county permits I had in my hand, showing them the stamped approvals. It didn't matter. They weren't there for facts. They were there for punishment. They said my refusal to pay the inflated HOA fees meant I was not in good standing, which apparently stripped me of all rights to contest their decisions. It was nonsense, but they knew dragging it through the courts would cost me more than I could stomach. A week later, the heavy equipment arrived. I stood at the edge of my yard as bulldozers and backhoes lined up like soldiers ready for war. My dam, my pond, years of work and investment, it was about to be torn apart, and all I could do was watch. Neighbors gathered, some whispering that it wasn't fair, others too afraid of the HOA to say anything out loud. Mrs. Chambers stood with her arms crossed, barking orders as if she were leading some grand operation. The machines roared to life, scooping and clawing at the earth. The water rushed out, spilling into the drainage ditch like a wounded animal bleeding out. The ducks scattered, the pond disappeared, and in its place was a mangled, muddy scar. Every scoop of dirt felt like a blow to my chest. I shouted, I protested, I even waved the permits again. But the crew ignored me. They were just following the HOA's authorization. By the time they were finished, my dam was nothing more than a pile of broken earth shoved to the side. The pond was gone, and the land looked barren and vulnerable, exactly the way it had before I'd ever fixed it. Mrs. Chambers gave me a final smirk as she left, as if to say, "That's what happens when you cross us." I stood there in silence, fists clenched, rage boiling beneath my skin. I knew they thought they had humiliated me, put me in my place. But as I stared at the wreckage, one thought kept echoing in my mind. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. The first few days after the dam was destroyed were quiet, almost eerily so. The pond was gone, leaving behind a crater of mud and stagnant puddles. Where there had once been rippling water and wildlife, there was only a scarred stretch of earth. The HOA congratulated themselves, parading their victory in emails and newsletters, claiming they had restored compliance to the neighborhood. They spoke as if they'd done everyone a favor, as if the dam had been some terrible menace. I knew better, and deep down, I suspected it wouldn't be long before nature proved me right. Then the forecast came. A massive storm system was moving in, bringing heavy rain for days. I watched the sky darken with a mix of dread and grim anticipation. Without the dam, there was nothing to slow the runoff, nothing to control the flow. I had quietly reinforced the drainage around my own property after the destruction, spending late nights digging and installing underground piping to protect my foundation. I knew what was coming, even if the HOA refused to see it. When the rain arrived, it was like a switch had been flipped. Sheets of water hammered the rooftops, pouring down driveways, racing through gutters that were never meant to handle that volume. Within hours, the lower streets of the neighborhood began to pool. By the second day, the once trimmed lawns of HOA board members were submerged under inches of murky water. Basements filled. Cars stalled. I stood at my window and watched as the water surged past, rushing into places the dam had once protected. The irony was cruel but undeniable. My property, the one they had targeted, remained dry. The drainage I had installed carried the water safely around my home, leaving my foundation untouched. Meanwhile, the HOA clubhouse, the pride of the neighborhood, was flooded knee-deep, its brand-new furniture floating like debris. The swimming pool, once a symbol of the board's control and status, overflowed into the parking lot, mixing with mud and sewage until it was unusable. Neighbors who had once stayed silent now cursed the board. I heard them shouting in the streets, demanding answers, demanding help. And though I kept to myself, there was a part of me that felt a cold, hard satisfaction. I hadn't lifted a finger to make this happen. Nature had simply taken back what they had ripped apart. The storm didn't care about compliance or dues, it cared only about balance. And without the dam, the balance had been destroyed. The morning after the storm broke, the neighborhood looked like a disaster zone. Lawns were drowned under layers of mud, fences had been uprooted, and trash bins floated in the middle of the street like lost buoys. The HOA clubhouse, the board's pride and joy, was cordoned off with caution tape, its floors ruined, drywall buckling, and the smell of mildew already setting in. Insurance adjusters moved through the area with clipboards, shaking their heads at the scale of the damage. Everywhere I turned, people were blaming the HOA, and for once, their whispers weren't timid, they were loud, angry, and directed at the board members who had once lorded over everyone with smug superiority. I didn't have to say a word. Everyone knew. The destruction wasn't caused by negligence on my part, it was the direct result of tearing down the dam. Word spread quickly that I had warned them, that I had even shown them permits proving the dam's legality. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now came up to me, their expressions a mix of guilt and gratitude. If they'd just left it alone, one man muttered as he stood ankle-deep in his flooded basement, this never would have happened. The HOA scrambled to defend themselves, but their arguments fell apart under scrutiny. Emails surfaced showing their eagerness to make an example of me. Meeting minutes revealed that their decision had nothing to do with safety and everything to do with power and money. Lawsuits began piling up from homeowners demanding compensation for ruined property. Even the county got involved after learning that the HOA had destroyed a structure built with proper permits. At the center of it all was Mrs. Chambers, the president who had orchestrated everything. Once untouchable, she now faced angry mobs at every meeting, her once commanding voice drowned out by shouts of frustration. Within weeks, she resigned in disgrace, citing health reasons, though everyone knew the truth. The empire she had built on fear and intimidation had collapsed under the weight of her arrogance. As for me, I kept my head down and watched quietly. My house was intact, my land secure, and my conscience clear. I didn't need to gloat or throw their mistakes in their faces. The flooding had done that for me. Justice had arrived, not through lawyers or fights, but through the simple, unstoppable force of cause and effect. And as I looked out over what was left of the neighborhood, I couldn't help but think, sometimes karma doesn't wait years. Sometimes it comes with the next storm.